Hi there, everyone. This is Isabel Garcia. I am your host for this segment, Parenting Plus. Thank you so much for joining us for this installment. I am very honored and excited to have our guest with us here today. We have Dr. Francesca Haveneck. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you go by Dr. Fran on social media. Many of you know her as she's board certified OBGYN and mom of three. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And so I'm honestly very just super excited, honestly, a bit starstruck to have you here. As many of us kind of know in the local news world, you are meeting people where they are on social media as, technology is continuing to evolve. Also part of a group of physicians and medical professionals that are on social media and getting the information out there. So just kind of starting off with that, can you talk to us about, what drove you to do that and what the experience has been like so far?
Yeah, I've loved creating content online to, like you said, really meet patients where they're at. I was a avid consumer of social media, and in 2021 I found myself with a little bit more free time after I graduated from my OBGYN residency. I chose to take 6 months off to stay home with my children, was scrolling a lot on TikTok, and the algorithm does learn you, and it realized that I was really interested in things like pregnancy, lactation, labor and delivery. And I just started seeing more and more videos that weren't always super accurate. And so I was like, well, who better than like an OBGYN to talk about these things? So I just started creating videos and talking about all sorts of things related to obstetrics and gynecology. And 4 years later, here we are.
Wow, that's incredible. So, and just seeing that evolution too, and knowing obviously, I talk with a lot of guests about just there's so much information out there, which is great. But then, as you mentioned, there's almost too much information out there sometimes, and then the disinformation, misinformation. But when it comes to especially empowering women with their own, body and health, what do you think, I guess, are still some of the stigmas or, just the mountain really that's out there? Because I understand, and myself being a mom too, you're out there looking for that information, but that credibility.
Exactly. There's so much information out there. Some of it's created out of, people not meaning ill, but sometimes perpetuating misinformation. And then there's people out there who are really trying to take advantage of the fact that, our healthcare system isn't perfect. Pregnancy is scary. New moms want to do best they can for their children and do try to take advantage of that by selling something in a way to really have benefit themselves but not benefit the viewer. So there's so much to look through. I always recommend really looking at someone's social media page, looking for credentials, making sure that they back up what they're saying with evidence-based things like studies or guidelines created by major medical societies when you're looking for that information, just because there's so much there to weed through that you don't always know, like, is this person someone who I should be listening to or not?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that insight. And then I'm super excited to really just uh, so eager to jump into the topic that we're talking about, which is essentially mom brain, right? When you really think about it. And so with this, there's new information out that was published in Nature Journal last year that really looked at just the kind of holistic approach, of what we're finding when it comes to just the physiological and just vast profound changes in mom's brain. And so can you just dive into what exactly this study talked about and really uncovered?
Yeah, so this was a study performed by female neuroscientists, and one of them, who has a PhD, she volunteered herself to be like the subject of the study. So she went through into an MRI machine, which is safe in pregnancy, um, right before she got pregnant, and then 27 times through her pregnancy, through 2 years after pregnancy. And so what they were looking at was actual like physical changes in her brain from preconception through pregnancy through postpartum.
And as far as some of the findings, I guess the way that most people, kind of, and what I grew up as, knowing kind of the mom brain, concept and stigma, if you will, is, oh, you're going to just forget everything. You become so scatterbrained and all the moving parts. But really what I found so interesting is that is showing, and as you mentioned, the kind of intangible ways all of the different and incredible shifts that really happen in the brain. And so, when it comes to the specifics, including just like gray matter and neuroplasticity, what is this showing right now?
Yeah, so when they looked at the images of the brain through this time span, what they found was that the gray matter of the brain decreased in size, and that certain ventricles in the brain that hold the fluid of your brain increased. And they also showed while that was decreasing, that the white matter, which is really connecting the gray matter, increased. And what this is really telling us is that our brain, in some ways, is remodeling itself through pregnancy, right? That there are brain changes. Now, this is a singular study of a singular person's brain. So I can't say for sure based on this study, right, that this is proving mommy brain. But it is the first time that we're really having a study that really shows us that, at least for this singular person,
Mhm.
her brain did change in pregnancy. And so I'm just so excited to see what we can do to build off of that information.
That's fantastic. And I believe in one of your videos, you said this is even already starting to, foster more studies based off of this study. And so, how can, especially just focusing on the specifics of, these topics in women's health, how can that help to give us more resources in the future?
Right. Understanding the basics of what's happening in our bodies at any point in our time span, right? Through puberty, through menstruation, through pregnancy, through postpartum, through perimenopause, through menopause. The more information that we gather about what's happening in our bodies, the more we're able to build on that. The more we're going to understand about how disease states happen. That way, once we understand that, we can use pharmaceuticals to see how can we target specific things in the brain, and we already see part of that, right? When what we're currently looking at, we talk a lot about menopause, and we've learned just in the last decade that there's thermoregulatory centers in our brain, and they've created medications that go just to that part in the brain. So for the hot flashes that people are experiencing in perimenopause and menopause, they now can target that exact center. So just by learning even this, right, that your
Mhm.
brain is changing in some ways and what part of the brain is changing, I'm not saying that we're going to develop medications based off of it, but who's to say that we can't do that for other life states and other conditions to just learn more about what's going on so we can continue to learn more about what happens in our bodies and what can also go wrong with our bodies and then create ways to help with those problems.
That's fantastic. And, you yourself, as a mom of three, and I know you said your kids are 2, 4, and 6, correct?
Correct.
And, what have, I guess, you experienced, especially, in the medical field, but just in your motherhood specific journey, and how does that drive you, in the work that you're doing?
So I have had two of my three children when I was still a resident, so I was working a lot. So it was as an OBGYN in training to then go through the experience that my patients were going through just made me understand things better. I unfortunately was one of those patients who threw up every single day of my entire pregnancies. So, and you don't really understand what like daily nausea and vomiting is and how debilitating that can feel until you've gone through it yourself for 27 months, right? So it just has made me understand what my patients are going through more than it did before. And I think part of my experiences have shaped a lot of things and how I feel about women's health, how I feel about treating my own patients. I feel very strongly about like that everyone should have a choice in all aspects of pregnancy from the beginning to the end. And I talk a lot about that on social media, right? Like everyone should have the option of like things like an elective induction because I was so desperate to have that option myself.
Mhm.
And I think just having gone through those experiences continue to make me believe that like everyone deserves options in pregnancy, in gynecologic care, in all aspects of like my job, basically.
Absolutely. That's so fascinating. And I just really appreciate all your insight into, these topics. And, you cover so many different topics within, of course, women's health, and gynecological health specifically. And so, just with again, information out there, and especially, so for example, my daughter's 7, wanting her to be able to grow up in a world where she can have access to, just all of the life saving and care needs that she may have as a growing girl and female. What is, I guess, at risk right now that we're seeing, and just kind of the state of motherhood and women's health in 2025?
I mean, obviously, it spans the lifetime of gynecologic and obstetrical care. You and I live in New York State. We have a lot of protected rights here, but there are many women and other patients who do not have those rights across our country, right? So there are people who cannot access safe abortions, and that is a huge problem for patients in other states. There's always an underlying conversation about birth control that's not rooted in like positivity for a variety of reasons. And so losing access to those things are always a concern as well. And so, I mean, when it comes to at least reproductive care, unfortunately, so much of your ability to access it really depends on where you live, which really was what the Dobbs decision really ultimately decided when they made that decision of abortion care go to the states, is that now it really depends on where you live.
And as far as, I guess, just being able to, again, meet, patients, moms, and women where they are, what are you hearing aside from just everything on social media? But I guess in terms of just what you're receiving, I know you've been featured on CNN, you've been featured on BuzzFeed, just in terms of the response and your approach to providing this type of information where people are on social media.
Yeah, so, it's not like I had some big goal to set out to be like this doctor content creator. I just enjoyed doing it and have kind of rolled with it as it came. How I see myself now is like I just want to be like your friend who happens to be an OBGYN who can like talk you through certain situations, right? As in like layman's terms in a way that you understand and how it applies to you. I have plenty of my own family members, friends who, call me up and wanted to ask me questions about their health. And like in many ways, I want to be that person online because I know not everyone has that resource. I know it's incredibly hard to get doctor's appointments, especially if it's something that you wanted to have a longer discussion about. And so I wanted to be a place where people knew they could come to, where someone who is credentialed to talk about these things is going to give them easy to digest information. And I always say, but like, don't just listen to me, take this information and go to that appointment once you can finally get it to talk about how what you learned online applies to you. And really, that's just my goal. I just want to be a source of information so people can make the right decision for themselves in conjunction with their own doctor, knowing that they came in with a little bit of information.
Excellent. Thank you again for all that insight. And I think, you touched on a really interesting point in terms of just being able to have that kind of, again, holistic approach and empowering people with the information, but just to not make those quick decisions. I think oftentimes, in this day and age that we live in, their information in the world, seems so fast and so busy, but it seems like kind of in tandem with that, you're saying, slow it down too. Take the information and then take the time, but also know that, the doctors are also humans and have, busy schedules too. And so I saw your post about, just that kind of information, if you have questions and stuff, but not giving direct medical advice, knowing that their information can't be blanketed to every single person.
Exactly. I mean, everything I talk about is always in like generality, right? Nothing that I'm saying applies directly to you as a patient. These are the guidelines written by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Here's what they recommend for this situation, and this is how I would walk through that with my patients. I like to create a lot of like tangible things for the audience because I want people to feel like they're getting something that they can use themselves. So I've created things like what I call the elective induction fact sheet, which comes up with like 15 questions that patients can take to their own doctor and say like, does this apply to me? How does this work in your hospital? What are my options? Like, what are the risks and benefits and alternatives to this? Because a lot of times I don't think patients know what to ask. So I'm like saying, here is a list of things so that you really feel informed about that specific situation. And, it's hard to navigate the healthcare system. It's hard enough to know like what kind of appointment am I booking? Is this my annual preventative care visit? Which in the medical side of things really means something to me. Like an annual preventative care visit for me is like your pap smear, your mammogram vaccinations, maybe STD testing. A lot of people think that actually that means that they're one free visit a year where they can address every problem. But I'm only given the time to talk to you about your pap smear, your mammogram, your vaccines, and your STD testing. And I would love to dive deeper into your menopause issues, and I want to help you, but during an exam, like an appointment that was made for that. So I do try to help people navigate the system in that way because I really do want people to get the care that they really deserve. But who even knows what type of appointment to book, right? Like right one teaches you that,
Oh, yeah.
right? So I continue to just try to help give you information, give you the things to ask your own doctor, teach you how to get that time with your doctor as an insight from someone who works in the system, right? But wants to help you outside of it.
Yeah, so that's so fascinating. I just almost had like a flashback to when I first had my daughter and, was kind of sent home from the hospital and then said, come back for the follow up. And I was like, the next day. like she's right, like she's come right back around. But and then just the kind of onslaught of information that you do get, especially as a new mom and new parenthood. I mean, and you're just going off of sleep deprivation and all the moving parts. And I find that so fascinating. But it seems like really just to not only empower the patient, but the doctor, and just putting that guidance out there. I wanted to flag, and I am so interested to see about if you can talk about the Pap smear, because I know that that was a topic that you had addressed in a video as well. And if you can, the new tools that are kind of starting to come out when it comes to just how this is done. And I know that it was done also with patients in mind. So I believe it's called Lilium as the speculum.
Oh, the speculum. Yes. Okay. So I think it's important first to discuss the difference between a speculum and a pap smear.
Okay.
A speculum is the tool that we use to insert to see the inside of your body, right? A pap smear is when I use a little brush as I'm using the speculum to get a couple cells from your body. Okay, so a lot of people think they're like the same thing. They're two completely separate things.
Okay.
We will do speculum exams. That doesn't include a pap smear. You can't really do a pap smear currently without doing the speculum exam.
Sure.
The speculum, as we know it, has been around for thousands of years. They have speculums back from 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome, which sometimes people say like, "Oh, we've done nothing to improve, healthcare," and everyone uses something from 2,000 years ago. But at the same time, we also haven't recreated wheels, right? So sometimes you have just created the best way to see inside someone's body. We're trying, I think, as a whole, we're still trying to see like, can we make that slightly better, right? So the speculum that you're referring to, instead of opening up like this, it kind of expands like this, which can help a little bit with the discomfort of when we open it, where it feels like more internal pressure. So I personally have not used this. I just have seen people talk about it. But it still goes in the body, and it still opens up a space that normally is compressed, because we have to be able to see like your cervix. And as we're doing it, that's when we can do the pap smear, the little brushing to get the cells. Now, the other thing to go off of that is that in many countries outside of the United States, they offer what's called just HPV testing. So HPV is the virus that causes 99% of cervical cancers. And in many other countries, they offer a self swab option. So you yourself insert just the little swab, and you swab around, and then they test it for HPV. Now, if it's positive, you still have to come see a gynecologist, and we still have to do the speculum exam. But if you're HPV negative, then great. So in the United States, we're starting to offer more of those options. So some clinics, and mine's working on getting it, that patients can swab themselves in the office, which is great. So no speculum, just a little swab. And there's some companies who've created, it's a direct to consumer product where they'll send you the wand, you swab yourself at home and send it back to them, and they'll let you know. So there's things that we're working on to like improve the process, right? We're doing little things, but in the end, a lot of times we still have to open something up and look inside. Unfortunately, haven't figured that one out yet.
Yes, that's definitely still something to work on, and goals to work towards.
Yeah, we'll see how when we get there.
Yes, absolutely. And so as far to as just taking all this information, and a lot of this is just even the medical information, whether or not you did the baby appointments and stuff like that, but kind of melding this with just community-based knowledge as well. And we're so lucky here in New York and in our community to have such a vast incredible wealth of resources, really, and community-based resources. But how crucial is it to making sure that communities are supported, especially with access to OBGYN and gynecological care?
I mean, a little last week when I went to DC to talk about the importance of healthcare, one of the things I said that was that without taking care of our mothers, we can't take care of our families, right? So if we're not providing those resources to our pregnant patients, our recent postpartum patients, then we're not taking care of families, and we're not taking care of each other. So really, I mean, I'm so thankful for the community we live in. We really do have so many incredible resources for all aspects of like the care that I at least participate in, from like pre-care to during your pregnancy to as you're delivering and to the postpartum period. Here in Monroe County, we have like the Healthy Moms Network, which again is providing resources for up to 2 years, I believe, after birth. Many places don't have this. So we are very thankful for the resources that we have. New York State is now mandating that certain patients have their doula services covered. Like everyone deserves to have support in labor. And there's many patients that I experience who don't have support. So for New York State to step up and say, we'll pay for your doula is incredible, right? And that's going to improve outcomes during and after they have their babies.
That's fantastic. And going back to, if you can, talking about your trip to DC, and you're speaking with Senator Elizabeth Warren, and kind of touching on what you discussed there, and then as information, and especially in the sciences and stuff, and how we've kind of come to this political crossroads, and how complicated that is. But I think that a lot of times I'm seeing too, of course, we know the research that's there about just health and relationship with social media, and how that then translates to just having the, again, circling back to the right information, knowing that science is always evolving as well.
Yeah, I was really honored to be invited to come to DC to talk with Senator Elizabeth Warren and several other Democrats for the current shutdown. And so, not to get like political, but my like job there was to talk about the importance of patients having health care. And that's really what my goal was, to describe what it's like to take care of patients who don't have health care, who don't have insurance that will cover their prenatal care visits, who don't have insurance, who can't pay for their insulin, for their gestational diabetes, and the outcomes of pregnancies that don't have care. So I was able to stand in front of the camera, talk to the news, talk to the members of the Senate, to talk about really my experiences taking care of that patient population. Um, our healthcare insurance in this country, is very unique to the United States. Every other country that makes as much money as we do has universal healthcare, and there's pros and cons. But overall, the pros are that everyone has healthcare and everyone can get care, and it doesn't bankrupt them. So it is interesting to see what could happen. Right now, open enrollment has started for many people, and people are starting to realize what it means when those healthcare subsidies aren't there anymore, right? When their insurance is so much higher than before, to the point that they can't afford it. And so, again, this isn't like saying these people are right, these people are wrong. This is just the facts of what's happening. And from my point of view as a physician who takes care of patients, it's really scary to know that there could be even more patients who won't be able to afford healthcare, and therefore won't be able to afford the most basics of prenatal care.
And when it comes to your experience, especially with patients, at various stages, before and during and after pregnancy, how, I guess, what have you seen in terms of how the lack of that healthcare is affecting their health outcomes?
Sure. I mean, it goes from the most basic parts of at the beginning of prenatal care, not starting things like a prenatal vitamin, which is could negatively impact their baby's growth and development. It means that I didn't have the opportunity to start a low dose aspirin to help prevent preeclampsia, which they then get in their third trimester, which necessitates a preterm delivery. Preeclampsia is not just a pregnancy limited to pregnancy, in the sense that once you're not pregnant, it's not a problem anymore. Actually, having preeclampsia has lifelong implications. You're much more likely to have cardiovascular disease later in life if you were diagnosed with preeclampsia. Same with gestational diabetes. If you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, um, you're going to have a 70% chance of being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes later in life. And if you don't get diagnosed, you never can do the prevention or the early detection of type 2 diabetes. And therefore, when you're 60 and you had uncontrolled diabetes for the last 30 years because you weren't able to see your PCP, now you have to go on dialysis. When if we had seen you for prenatal care and diagnosed you with gestational diabetes, managed it well, and then got you the care for the next 30 years, maybe you wouldn't have to go on dialysis because we caught it in time. And so those are the extremes, but they're very real, and they're very, people don't always think about that, right? Like pregnancy conditions are related just to pregnancy, when in reality they're like
Right.
precursors of the future.
Mhm.
And so by not catching that then, we can't prevent it in the future either. And that's just like the long term, right? That's not even the short term of like you being sick and like you needing assistance, and like your heart could be failing, all those things, right?
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's like it spans acutely pregnancy, acutely postpartum, and chronically for your whole life. And if you're not getting care, then we're just setting ourselves up for disaster.
Oh, that's really fascinating. Just the interconnectivity, and as you mentioned, just the life of terms. That all of this is connected. That's really fascinating. And I know we have a couple minutes left here, but in terms of, I mean, there's so many different specific topics that we could just go, dive way deeper into. Kind of circling back to the mom brain concept.
Back to the beginning.
Yeah, so back to the beginning, as we often do in mom talk, right? But as far as moms out there that maybe are, especially new moms, right? Just navigating the sea of all of the different moving parts and physiological changes. What do you think that if they happen to be seeing this and say, oh, there's, that research out there, what are your hopes that, moms and, even dads and new parents can take away from this information?
Yeah. I mean, on like the science side, I want people to be like, okay, people are putting money towards studying me, right? We know that not enough money goes into women's health and to women's health research and all of that. So that's why actually talk about it a lot on social media because I want people to know we are trying. We are trying so much to try to get this information and then know what to do with it. So we are trying and we're collecting information all the time. And just because I don't have the fix for every medical condition today, at least we're always making strides towards it. On like a personal level, I just want people to give themselves grace during this time. Your brain just lost some of its gray matter. And I can't tell you exactly what that means, but your body went through something and every organ system is affected by pregnancy. Now we know the brain as well, right? So this is a period where your body's doing incredible things and your body's changing in many ways that you didn't even know. And so you have to give yourself or you have to give your partner grace and like working through them.
That's beautiful. Thank you so very much. And as far as any additional information, of course, as mentioned, you're paging Dr. Fran on social media. Is there any other, I guess, resources that you want to shout out, or more places where people can find that information that they're seeking?
Yeah. So ACOG is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. They're the ones that we become like board certified through. There are like core resource. They have a lot of patient centered information as well. So if you're ever looking for specific guidelines. What should I do in this situation? What does the current science show? That's one of the best places that you can go to because it's created it for you and then easy for you to digest way.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to chat with me today. And we wanted to thank you for joining us for this installment of Parenting Plus. Thank you so much.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 on demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.